thank you, and again, welcome everybody this morning for joining us. We've kind of changed the way that we're looking at how we do the speaker series going into FY11. And one of the first things I hope that you noticed when you walked into the room is that we're trying to get you to talk more. So going forward, we want our speaker series to look more like a conversation. So I have a bunch of questions here that I've come up with that I'd like to ask Frank about our image. But at any time during the course of the next hour and a half, please feel free to ask questions. We've got some microphones in the back of the room. But this is really about you having the opportunity to talk to somebody whose role and job it is to help us shape our image agenda for Microsoft. So instead of me sitting here and talking about all of the great things that I've seen you do over the course of many years of having worked for Microsoft on the agency side and talk about the great work that you've done on that part of it, every time I think about great news stories, every time I think about great product launches, your fingerprints have been somewhere on it. But I don't want to sit here and talk about your resume, but how can you describe for us, in your own words, how you actually ended up here at Microsoft in the current role that you have as the CVP of Corporate Communications?
Well, actually, I want to answer the brand question first.
I
spent a lot of time thinking about this. I mean, she told me she was going to ask.
I was going to ask that, but okay, go ahead.
So the brand that I love, I conducted a little poll last night. My daughter had Starbucks on the list. She was, one of her first words was Bucks. And she recognized the logo from the time, before she could walk, she could sort of wiggle her pudgy little finger at the sign and say Bucks because she knew that was where the cocoa lived. So that was her vote for the brand that she loved. But I'm going to pick the Marine Corps as my favorite brand. I am a Marine, was a Marine, I guess. But the reason I love the brand is that it's incredibly authentic and it's enduring. So, it stood for something, 200 years ago, and it stands for basically the same thing today, which I think is a good mark of brand promise and brand value. And then the brand that I don't like is the Dallas Cowboys.
The Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah,
okay.
Because it represents arrogance. And any team that calls itself America's team just deserves to have bad things happen to them.
So it's right up there with Donald Trump, then,
right.
Basically.
So
good.
There you go. There's
okay.
my favorite and least favorite brand of the moment.
Perfect.
So the question before I got here, I ask myself that question all the time. I actually grew up in the Bay Area. My dad was in the electronics industry, and so I had a pretty early immersion in high tech, at least little bits and pieces of transistors and heat sinks and thermal couplers and things like that. I went to the University of Oregon, got a journalism degree, and then joined the Marine Corps, which, from the University of Oregon to the Marine Corps, if you're familiar with Eugene, is a bit of a culture shock. Since one is relatively liberal and one is not, I can safely say that I was the only person in the officers club during elections that was rooting for the other team, so to say. So I kept it very quiet about politics. And then when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a public affairs officer. So I was responsible for running a base newspaper, TV station, doing community relations, crisis communications, and generally working on the image of the base there. And when we deployed, what we did around the world, how we sort of presented the face of the Marine Corps to the world, which is pretty interesting. And then I came back to the Northwest. I worked at a variety of PR firms and was always really interested in technology. I had early computers, I had an early internet account. I ran a bulletin board, which is just kind of embarrassing to think about. And then eventually I started with a PR firm that was doing PR work for Microsoft in the small business space, small business and channel partner space. And I loved it. And I was at that agency for 13 years, working on Microsoft almost exclusively on pretty much every product along the way. And then I ran the account at Wagner Edstrom for, I guess, 4 years, all up. And worked with a bunch of people in corporate communications. Larry Cohen, who had this job, two people back was my client, and we used to have these arguments about who had the better job, whether he had the better job or I had the better job. And I always advocated that I had the better job because, I didn't have to deal with Microsoft 100% of the time, and he did. So then Larry left, and then there was a gap, and then Microsoft hired somebody else to take his job who really loved cars. He loved cars so much, he was here for 6 months, and then he left again. And at that time, I talked to Mitch Matthews, and, she said, well, what do you think? And I said, I think that maybe Larry was right all along, and that he had a better job than I did, and I'm going to come on board, and there's some things that, I might want to do. And then the big downside was I had spent 13 years complaining about the way Microsoft did things. It's like, God, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they did that. And then, I got here. I'm like, holy cow, this is my problem now. I guess I got to do something about some of the things that I said I didn't like. So that's how I ended up here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about the top 10 list of things that you're doing and working on in your role right now.
Well, I look at I think I have two jobs, at least. I have a job running corporate communications for the company, and that's a team of about 90 people that are responsible for creating content, disseminating content, primarily through news and social media. And this includes the news center and analyst relations, sort of controlled specifically by corporate communications. And that's a big chunk of work. And then there's the second piece of work, which is thinking about the discipline for the company overall. And our model, we have a decentralized model here, like we have in a lot of things. But in my role, I think about what does the communication discipline need to do? What are the skills that we need to have? What do we need to train for? What do we need to hire for? What are we going to have to look like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, from a company all up? So those are the two things that I sort of get up every morning and I think about, like, what are we doing to tell our story today, and what are we doing to build capacity so that we can continue to tell our story in whatever medium that might show up from, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. Are we doing a good job of managing talent? Do we have people moving from team to team in a pretty seamless way? I call that, sort of plug compatibility. Can we take somebody from the Windows team and move them off to Xbox and have some degree of assurance that the skills that they've developed are the same skills that they would need there? So there's, a pretty good amount of work that has to happen there. And then there's what happens in the world around us. What are the key products that we're thinking about? What are the initiatives we're driving? What's happening in the industry? What are the crises we're going to have to deal with? I get up every morning, and the first thing I do is I sit down on my computer, and I sort of gingerly open up the screen and I look at it and see what has happened over the past 7 or 8 hours that will require attention. And so today you get up and you see Mark Benioff has got an editorial in Fortune saying that Microsoft is dead again, and we should think about what do we do about that. I see that Jon Stewart went on a tear last night about Apple, busting down the doors of the Gizmodo guy, and with sort of the jackbooted thug tactics they used. But as doing that, he just basically stamped himself as fanboy number one for Apple. Here's his iPad, here's his MacBook Air, here's his iPhone. And it's like, all right, so we should think about that. So there's a lot of that stuff that happens on a regular basis. So I sort of think, you think long term, what's the discipline need to do? Midterm, are we set up for what we're going to be doing 6 to 9 months from now? We have products coming out. Are we doing the right work to sort of prime the pump so that those land in a good way? And then what do we need to deal with today? What are the crises and opportunities that we have to deal with today? Some of them are external, and some of them are sort of self-inflicted injuries.
Mm-hmm. So most of us are busy working on budget planning for FY11. And your team has been working on what you're calling the communications image agenda. Why are you guys working on that, and what's so important about it?
One of the challenges that Microsoft has that really is different from almost any other company in the world is that we talk to every audience. I mean, literally every single audience in the world, has the potential to use one of our products or services. So we have a volume issue. So we make a lot of noise at any given time. We might be talking about Xbox, we might be talking about Windows Live, we might be talking about Dynamics, we might be talking about the cloud, and everybody hears those messages. It's very hard to target them discreetly. And the risk is that at the end of the day, people don't know what we stand for. They lose track of what does Microsoft think is really important. What do you value? What do you think about sort of at the core? And that sort of gets to the, what does it mean to be a brand, an authentic brand? You actually have to understand that. So we look at that and how do we do two things at the same time? How do we make room for all the products and services groups to go out and tell their story about what it is that they need to sell to customers or how they need to deposition the competition, and at the same time make sure that there is a layer above that things snap up to, so that we're actually accruing to that master brand, the brand Microsoft, not just Office or Windows or Xbox or Windows Live or Windows Phone or whatever the case may be. Like, what is the master brand? And there was a set of research that we did that really looked at what are the attributes of that brand, and then what are the drivers of the brand. What are the things that if we can make traction on really increase the value of our brand. And it was a really interesting set of research against a pretty broad audience, and there's a couple of things that popped from a communication standpoint that we knew if we could do a better job in those areas, we would improve the brand. So there's 4 of them that we're looking at.
So there were 3 originally, and
right.
then you added the 4th.
The 4th.
Okay.
So the ones that we know move the brand. Quality moves the brand. Perception of quality increases the value for the brand Microsoft. Innovation improves the brand. Those are the 2 really big drivers for brand Microsoft. We're making a bet on citizenship. We did a lot of research. It turns out that citizenship, perception of citizenship, is Microsoft a good corporate citizen, doesn't dramatically move the brand against pretty much any audience. But we're betting that it will over time, that'll be increasingly important to people.
But how are you doing that? And then,
well, and so but it's interesting because that's one where we could have looked at it and say, hey, citizenship, it's just like, as long as we're not worse than anybody else, we don't have to do anything. That's how we've operated in the past sometimes, and then we have to run to catch up. It's like, oh, well, all of a sudden this is important and we're in a deficit, so we're going to catch up. So we're saying, hey, we're going to make a bet on citizenship, and we're going to focus on that. And then the last one is the cloud, where we have to drive a cohesive story around the cloud because it really represents the future of Microsoft and the future of the industry, sort of independently of anything else. So those are the 4, the 4 pillars of the image agenda. The quality one is one where we're not actually going to take a huge role from a communication standpoint, because you can talk about quality until you're blue in the face, but if people don't experience the products in a quality way, you don't help yourself. So the quality scores are going up. We're seeing some big increases in perceptions on quality, and it's really attributed to Windows 7 because people are having a great experience with Windows 7. I send a periodic email to Steven Sinofsky. Thank you, Steven, for making my life easier here. Windows 7, let's keep the momentum up as you start work on Windows 8, because it really, it provides an overall lift to the brand in a pretty spectacular way. And then on the other 3 are the ones where we'll have some focus.
So one of the key elements of the image agenda is taking a proactive approach to managing the news that we want to amplify. So how are we going to do that?
So this is the tricky part, is because we can't think about the image agenda as a tax that everybody else has to pay. We actually have to make it easy for them to tell, for people across Microsoft to tell stories that both advance their individual business objectives and accrue to the image agenda. And so what we do is we provide the channels, like the news center, which is our direct to consumer news service. I mean, think about it as Microsoft TV or Microsoft New York Times, however you consume your news, where we're telling our stories directly. And innovation is a great example there. You know, we don't want to claim innovation. It's like saying you're cool. I mean, as soon as you say you're cool, by default, you're not. As soon as you claim innovation and say we are an innovation company, you essentially basically say that you're not. But what you can do is you can show innovation. And one of the ways you do that with the product standpoint is you do the sort of the behind the scenes, the making of stories that really illuminate that. And a great example is what we're doing with Project Natal and the Xbox team. And you saw a little bit of that at CES, where we did sort of the making of Project Natal, where you interview the engineers, you talk about the thinking that went into it, you know, what are you doing, where did this research come from? Turns out a lot of it came from Microsoft Research, where we spent a fair amount of money from a company. Here's how it gets translated into the product, and then here's how it'll have an impact on the world. And then people go, wow, that's pretty interesting. And then they use the word innovation attached to that. And we're doing the same thing. We've done the same thing with Bing and with Windows Phone, where you do the behind the scenes look. You show how the products came into being. You know, you show that it's a result of long-term thinking and research, and that illuminates for people in a way that we don't have to claim. And then the second piece of it is by using our executives and our other events to do what we call signposting, where you pick a topic where you really believe is going to be important, and you say, here's work that we're doing on it right now, so that you essentially, you don't say we're going to turn this into a product necessarily, but you say this is going to be important for the industry, we're making investments in it, and we're going to show you some of the things that could happen. TechFest is a good example of that, the way we bring press in and show them some of the work that the research guys are doing. And then Craig Mundy, in conjunction with TechFest, we do a very intimate all-day event with key reporters, bloggers, and analysts, where we show them prototypes of things that we're thinking about, how you might really use 3D in a home environment, what might be next for Project Natal beyond just the games. And then they look at that and they go, wow, Microsoft is thinking about things 3, 4, 5 years, 10 years into the future. They've got a vision that is pretty compelling.
So we like to measure things here at Microsoft. I really do look at this plan and wonder, how are you going to do that?
The PR measurement is an evolving science. Maybe it's not even a science. We're having all sorts of great discussions around how to measure it. The beauty of picking these things is that we measure the value of our brand on a regular basis, and we have a baseline because we've done all the research. And the number one measurement of success will be how we do in our brand surveys. We've measured for innovation. 6 months from now, when we do our next study, if we have not improved, we're not doing the right things. Citizenship is the same way. We've measured citizenship against the government elite audiences for probably 10 years, I think, through the IGES study. So we can tell exactly how we have been doing against that audience. Now we're going to extend it out to a consumer audience and say, against this baseline, how are we doing? How are we improving? So you look at the brand study as one important way, and then the second one is the number of stories that, and I use the word stories very generically. They're blog posts, they're social media outreach, they're analyst reports, they're TV, they're stuff that we put up on the News Center ourselves. What is the quantity of stories, and how did they score in our measurement system, which is called Prime?
So how do you think that our brand is currently doing in the ad side and the marketing side? How do people perceive us?
We have a very strong brand. But it's vulnerable in some areas. And that really showed in the work, in the research that came out. And Mitch talked a lot about it in her mid-year review, where they sort of called it the watermelon. It's green on the outside, so you can actually look at the scorecard and say we're number 1 or number 2 in these areas. But when you really sort of dig in deep, you start seeing signs that were red, and that some of our core brand attributes are under attack by competitors. And we have to defend them, and we have to sort of backfoot our competitors at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think are the biggest hurdles to improve our image?
Focus. I talked about the volume issue, and I think about like this mythical construct that I call the voice of Microsoft, right? And the voice of Microsoft is made up of everything that we do. So it's our ads, it's our speeches, it's our press releases. I think we're averaging about 3 press releases a day as a company in the United States. It's probably 10
that's too
a
many?
day. Oh, that's probably too many. It's the speeches, it's the stories we place, it's our blog posts, it's the social media outreach, it's everything. It's the voice of Microsoft. And over time, that voice has gotten louder and louder. Now, when we have something to say, whether it's a product or it's a initiative, and the cloud is a good example, we are faced with 2 choices of how to break through on that. Choice 1 would be to sort of turn down that volume overall, the voice of Microsoft, and be quiet a little bit, and then have a conversation. Like, hey, we think this is important, or hey, we're announcing this product. We don't often do that, because nobody controls the voice of Microsoft. There's 90,000 people that participate in that, and we don't have a command and control mentality in that area. So instead what we do is we take our biggest voices, usually our executives, and we say, man, you really got to break through. And the way we're going to have you break through is we're going to make a big, bold statement. And you're going to stand up on stage, and you're going to jump up and down, and you're going to say, this is the most innovative thing the world has ever seen. It is going to change the world. It is going to sell gazillions of copies, and, et cetera, and so on. And then you break through. And that works, except you have set expectations in a place that is very hard to hit. And you've stolen from the future to do that, because you've made a prediction to break through. You said, we're going to sell a lot of something, which means that when you sell a lot of something, you're not going to be able to make news about it again, because, doing what you said you would do is intrinsically not the news. Plane lands safely at 4, news at 11 doesn't make any headlines. So then we come out and we say, hey, we actually did sell 1 million of whatever it was. People are like, that's very nice. So we've stolen from the future. We didn't get the value of that, and we set expectations that we could miss. So we have to do a better job of finding ways of turning the volume down, which we're getting better at, and not stealing from our future news in a way that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got a question there. Mm-hmm. No, you're asking a phenomenal question. The employees here are harder on us, especially in innovation. So if you look at the innovation, quality, and citizenship, employees score us way higher on citizenship than the rest of the world does. So we're doing a great job there. People believe we do good things. We participate in the right way. We give back to the communities in which we live and operate. So we score higher there internally than we do externally. Innovation, man, not true at all. The employee base is way more skeptical than the external audiences are. So we do have to do, when I look at the innovation plan that we're running, the number one audience is, first audience is employees. Number one audience to reach is employees, Microsoft employees, because if I can't convince you that we have a vision for the future and we're going to be able to deliver on it, I can't tell anybody else because it's just not believable. Because eventually somebody will come in and ask a random set of employees and get a completely different answer than what we're saying publicly, and then we lose spectacularly. So we do have to tell our own story, here first, and there will be some work to do that. Yes. I'll take sort of the first piece first, and then I'll try to address the second one, which is in some ways harder. One of the challenges we have with citizenship is we do so much as a company. I don't know how many of you see the citizenship report that Pamela Passman sends out every month. I mean, it is pages and pages of phenomenal things that we have done as a company around the world in local communities. The software we've given, the programs we've participated in, the outreach we've done, the partnerships we have. It really is an inspiring list. But it is spread everywhere. So it doesn't, again, it gets back to the same problem that we have, is that for an external audience, they don't think we stand for anything in citizenship. They might know Microsoft did something in this area, and I appreciated it, but it's not big enough to break through. So as we look at what we're trying to do, we are trying to focus our efforts in citizenship, in a more discrete way. So we're going to provide more guidance that says, education will probably be the number one thing that we want to stand for from a citizenship standpoint. Probably. We're still in negotiations with that. And so the environment, what we do to sort of, as a company and through our partners, to really do good from an environmental standpoint is the second one. And then there's the third one is online safety and privacy and education in those areas. So the three things that we will probably focus on more. And if we're smart, then we align our philanthropic efforts against those. We align our volunteer efforts against those. And we align our programmatic efforts against those, so that a year from now, if somebody says, hey, when you think about Microsoft from a citizenship standpoint or a philanthropic standpoint, what is it that you stand for? Hopefully one of those things would pop up. And right now it probably wouldn't. If you asked in the Puget Sound area, they might say, hey, great job with the fireworks. Seriously, I mean, we give a lot of money, but what is going to break through this year? It's probably the fact that there's going to be fireworks on the 4th of July because of money that we gave. And that's nice, but again, it doesn't necessarily accrue. Your second question about Google, Google does a good job of putting a lot of effort against a fewer set of things in that area. And so, with their foundation, they give a big dollar number to one thing. And we give a bigger dollar number to 100 things. They break through, and then I get grumpy emails from people saying, how come we don't break through on this? We gave out a bigger dollar number, but when you talk to people about it externally, and you say, look, we gave this huge number, and they're like, yeah, but you didn't give it to one organization, or you didn't bet on any one thing, so it's just kind of not as interesting. And then secondly, Google does have a halo. We had a halo once too, and people who have been around for a while remember what that was like. It is a life cycle of a company. I'm here to tell you, I've been on the upside and I've been on the downside of that. Google is heading rapidly towards that downside, and they are not having a good time with it. Last week was a tough week for them. Somebody's suggesting that they be broken up, that they're a monopoly, that they have privacy issues. They're doing all these things. They're saying the same things. Their execs are saying the same things they said 2 years ago, where the audience would break into applause. They're saying those same things, and the audience is saying, like, I don't believe you anymore. So, there is an opportunity for us there.
So where's our halo right now, do you think? Are we really, really dull, getting brighter?
We're actually doing pretty well. I mean, first of all, everybody wants, people love competition, and people love an underdog. And, for some reason, we're underdog in a couple of big markets now. We can be lovable in those markets. So people love Bing. I mean, Bing is a phenomenal brand for us. And people, if you look around a year ago, Bing did not exist as a brand. I mean, just think about that for a second. There was no brand called Bing. There was no awareness of Bing a year ago. We announced it at the All Things D conference a year ago. And now we have phenomenal unaided awareness of Bing. People are making, I saw a t-shirt the other day, I binged your mom last night. And I'm like, we should have done that. We didn't.
Not
somebody
really,
else did.
Not really.
No, well, I mean, there's no HR people here or anything, but that is an example of a brand coming from nowhere and doing really good. So we should be proud of that. I mean, we don't, our market share is growing. We have a long way to go, but the brand stands for something. It's differentiated. People like it. There's an emotional resonance to it. The picture on the home page, or on the search page is something that gets passed around and talked about. Great example there. The Project Natal stuff is going to rock people's worlds. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen some of it. It's going to be really cool. It's going to go way beyond its appeal to the sort of the traditional Xbox audience. So I think we're going to score some big innovation points from Natal. And in the other markets where we were having real problems, whether it's Windows or Windows Phone, we have the products in the market, or will have the products in the market to sort of get us back into the game, and we have to execute against that. So I feel generally optimistic. We've got great product flow. If we execute from a communication standpoint, I think it'll be a good year.
So what's the role that the employees play to improve our brand?
I actually think that we are our own worst critics. I mean, it's like the disease model, right? You don't go to a doctor who very often says you're healthy, and you never go to a Microsoft meeting where people say, hey, things have gone pretty well. And I think the number one thing is that we should reflect both inwards and outwards that there is really good work happening. And I'm as skeptical as the next person. And believe me, when we don't do well, I can be as critical as anybody else. But I have these meetings with people at Microsoft who say, Frank, who does a good job in PR? Well, give me a company that does a good job in PR and telling its stories. I'm like, yeah, I got an idea. We do. We do a pretty good job. We consistently win awards. We actually do have this great brand, and we can do better. But let's not let the fact that we should be doing better or we aspire to do better blind us to the fact that we actually are doing really good stuff, across an incredible array of things. So the thing I would tell people to do is, at least familiarize yourself with some of the really interesting things that are happening around the company. We run with Xbox Live, we run essentially the 5th biggest network, TV network, in the country, in the United States. 22 million people have Xbox Live accounts. That is huge. The media and entertainment event was last week. We had a bunch of people come in. One of the guys that was there was Ari Emanuel, who talked about some of what he's telling some of his clients. He said, he encouraged Conan to come and go on Xbox Live if we would have put programming around him. He said, because you reached the Conan audience. You just haven't activated that network. I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting that somebody outside of Microsoft is looking in and saying, undiscovered asset for what we're doing. And it goes on as you look at all, you look at all our assets. We're doing some really interesting things, and we just don't do a very good job of sort of highlighting those beyond the silos. So that somebody who lives in Xbox could say, hey, we got this great service called Xbox. Somebody who lives in Office could say, 7 million people downloaded the beta of Office 2010. It's the largest beta download we've ever had for Office, and it's getting phenomenal reviews. But does the rest of us know that? Probably not, but it should make us proud of the work that's happening there.
So you touched on storytelling just a little bit, and it seems like storytelling is really important to you. Why is it that we at this company have a hard time with it? And if you have to give us a grade, A, B, C, D, what would that be?
This is a fascinating, storytelling is a fascinating topic, and I would say in general it's something we have struggled with. And we've put a lot of effort into it. I know there's been a lot of classes that have been taught. I've actually taught some of those classes, as Creamier knows. I could talk about the elements of the story, the hero's journey, the moment of peril. We can do all that. A lot of times, though, where we break down is not in the storytelling itself, but in the content. We allow ourselves to be pushed too far away from really great content. And any story at its nucleus has a great idea. And I will say this was driven home to me at CES this year, which, I helped with Steve's speech, which didn't go all that well, right? The coverage of it was sort of like, meh. And so kind of tough backstage, getting ready to go on out, and he left, and we looked around the room, and I said, you know what? It would have been good if we had an original thought in there. And we didn't have an original thought. And so we had a story around it, and we had really nice, shiny words that sounded good if you said them really quickly. But there wasn't an original thought that really stuck. And so what I am encouraging people now is, as you sit down and think about the story that you want to tell, before you do all the other work, before you do the framework and you find the heroes and the villains and the antagonists and the moment of peril and the transformative experience and the color points and the tension, all the things that make a great story, you have to find that original thought that you're going to build it around, that original idea that you really want to illuminate at the end of the story that people will take away. And there can't be more than one or two. And when we really get crystal clear on that, then we can build phenomenal stories around that. So you have to do both. You have to have the framework of how to tell a story and what makes it land and the color and all those things, and you have to have the original ideas and the content to support those. And if you don't have both of them, you don't get to where you need to go.
Are there places in the company where you've seen some good storytelling?
There are a couple of examples, and I'll use some press coverage to talk to it. As we did the run-up to Windows 7, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal, sort of the making of Windows 7. I thought was a really good example of storytelling, because we took the reporter on a journey that we illuminated along the way with the key points that we wanted to make. And the points were around quality, ease of use, and partner engagement. And we knew that the whole thing was going to be seen through the lens of Vista was really screwed up. So we had to find a way of illuminating each of those points in a way that, in the end of it, would make people feel like Microsoft knows how to build a complicated product and ship it on time. And that was the thought that we wanted to leave people with, and everything else pivoted around that. And then we did a good job of picking the color points. And when you really think through it that way, and you think like a reporter, you can put things in front of them that are like breadcrumbs or candy that just lead them directly to that. And you can help people tell little stories that illuminate that. So Julie Larson Green told the story about getting all the engineers for Windows 7 together in the conference center at the Maidenbauer in downtown Bellevue. The first time ever that all the engineers have been together to sort of talk about what's coming next, and how she sort of pulled people together for that and what she did. And as soon as I heard her tell that story in an internal event, I said, that is going to be the lead of a story. That is what we want in the lead, the first paragraph of a story that runs somewhere, because it's so compelling and it's so interesting, and it makes such a big point that things have changed, that any reporter is going to grab onto that and say, wow, that is the nucleus of the story. And if you get them started there, things have changed, then the rest of the story has to sort of flow through. Well, what's changed? Oh, more focus on partners. And then you tell the story about Steven Sinofsky gallivanting around the world, meeting with partners, and then, and so on and so on. And it's a very natural flow. But you really have to understand and internalize that content first before you can go out and tell it. So that's one example. I think another good example is the Windows Phone 7 work, where they can actually go and they look back at all the work they did to think about Windows 7, and you're bringing in designers from other places and to think about the UI in a different way, so that you've done all that thinking beforehand, and then you expose it externally when you're ready to talk about it. And the sort of the making of the prehistory really nails the point that says this is different than what's come before, and it's got a different point of view. We're not trying to be like everybody else. That's one of the things that we get a rap for as fast followers. And the coverage from the Barcelona event was pretty positive, because people said this is different from Microsoft. They have a different point of view. They're trying to do something different from the market overall.
So some people might say that it's really PR's responsibility to be good storytellers. But is there something that every employee should be good at in terms of storytelling?
I actually think we're all in PR right now. Every single person is in PR, because I would bet that every employee at Microsoft either has Facebook, Twitter, a blog somewhere, or participates in social media really broadly in some way. And that means we are all telling our stories all the time, and we have to be conscious of that. And I'll just do an aside, and I think this was driven home to me. And we're all spokespeople for Microsoft when we do that. Just by the way, remember that. Anything you put up on your Twitter account, you should expect to see yourself quoted as an official spokesperson. And I know this because like 3 or 4 weeks ago, the AT&T network went down. What a shock. And so my cell phone, my Windows mobile phone, stopped syncing mail. I was irritated. I called AT&T. They tried to blame Windows phones on it. And I'm like, no. And they said, oh, yeah, the WAP network is down. They finally said, the WAP network is down, and that's why the browsers won't work and your email's not syncing, because it relies on that protocol. So I, put on a little thing like, hey, just talk to AT&T customer support, on my Twitter feed. They said the network's down and they expect it to be up in a couple of hours. The next day, I'm quoted in TechFlash. Microsoft CVP Frank Shaw confirms that the AT&T now. Like, what the heck? As like, what made that interesting for that reporter, other than the fact that I work for Microsoft? So we are all in PR, and everybody is a broadcaster. So at any given time, we have the potential to talk to an audience. And the thing that I think people should really be able to do is they should be able to represent our products well, especially the consumer-facing products, and be able to say what's cool about Windows 7, what's cool about Office 10, what's interesting about Windows Phone 7, what are we doing interesting from a citizenship standpoint. I think about these things as elevator demos or elevator conversations. When you're talking to a relative or an in-law and they say, why should I use IE 8? You should be able to say, hey, most secure browser, phenomenal privacy settings, whatever thing, the web slices are really cool, and let me switch your default to IE8 from Firefox, and be an evangelist in that way.
You talk a lot about simplicity, and I pulled out an email that you wrote, and I just want to read just a couple of sentences of this. You say, we live in a complex world, getting more complex by the day. If we design with simplicity in mind, all of our lives will be much easier and our results better. Why is it that we seem to have a hard time making our messages really, really simple and clear for people to understand?
If I knew the answer to that question, my life would be a lot easier. We overcomplicate things. I mean, we just do. There is nothing from a overall, I'll just make from overall marketing standpoint that we can't complicate more and feel good about. So we have to start from a basis of simplicity. We're never going to get across more than 3 messages. But I mean, people don't absorb more than 3 messages, probably even fewer than that. 1 would be better. So we have to design from a storytelling standpoint, from a simplicity, because it's going to get more complicated as it goes along. When I was at the agency and we were working through the Bill and Steve transition, which was pretty complicated and very short fuse, so we didn't have a lot of time to work on it. And I was sitting in a conference room and I was looking at the plan, and we had done a plan that had Bill and Steve doing 20 10-minute interviews, 20 over like a 2-hour period. And I said, we're doing PR like they used to design Windows. I mean, like the maximum amount of complexity and the belief that everything is going to work just fine. Like there are going to be no problems. Because you have one problem in any of those things, the entire thing falls apart. So you have to start from simplicity. Like, let's do one thing and let's do it really, really well, and then let's see how it lands. And that's true in planning. It's true in the way we tell our stories. It's true in the way we collaborate with each other. If we focus on simplicity, we break through. And when we don't break through.
Noise.
It is just noise, and you can see that in planning documents. You can see it in press releases. I had a go nuclear moment when we did an announcement with HP. And partner announcements are always hard, and the press mocked us because they read the press release and they listened to our press conference and they said, I have no idea what they just announced. And I agreed with them. I mean, we didn't call out the value proposition that we really wanted to land. And when we see other companies do it, it lands. Apple does a great job with that from a competitive standpoint. They land a message. Google, on their good days, does a pretty good job with that. And we have to be better there.
So did somebody have a question before I keep going? So digital is going to be the focus for FY11 and almost everything that we do. How do you really manage that when we've got blogging, we've got Facebook, and
personal accountability? People have to. We have not yet made the shift. People, generally speaking, globally, and then more generalized here at Microsoft, have not made the shift in understanding that there is no longer a difference between your personal and your professional lives from a communication standpoint. And, that is a big shift to make. So, I talk to people who say, well, like, why are you upset at me, Frank, that I twittered about buying an iPad? Because this is my personal Twitter account. Like, the fact that the press follow it, I guess that doesn't really, land with people. But the fact is that we have one persona. It's who we are. and we represent it to the world in a variety of ways, and they will see it as Microsoft. Like, you are speaking on behalf of Microsoft. And so when people internalize that, really clearly, then it does change behavior in a way that is helpful, because it makes everybody think a little bit harder about what you might say. You would not go to an event where you were speaking and brag about a competitive product. Probably. You wouldn't go on the radio and trash a competitor. Probably. But people feel like, in the online social media world, you can do that and not have it be attributed to anybody other than, Joe Smith or Jane Doe. And so the thing that I really encourage people to think about is that you have one persona. There isn't you can't draw an artificial distinction between personal and professional, and that in the things that you project to the world, you are projecting on behalf of Microsoft at some level.
So I want to switch gears just a little bit, play a little game.
Okay.
I have about 6 different words on my sheet here, and I want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
And you can say whatever you want about it. And I encourage you, if you have a word that you want to throw at him, feel free. Cloud computing.
Important and confusing. Keep going. So how many people either saw or read about Steve's speech at the University of Washington? Okay, yeah, that's good. I think that was a good example of us really landing, some key messages, in terms of cloud computing for the company, in a way that tied things together. There is no doubt about it that cloud computing is where the industry is going. It is the future of the company. And the only question is how long it takes us to get there and sort of what it looks like along the way. And the challenge that we had, our competitors were in the process of putting us in a box, putting a frame around us that said Microsoft doesn't believe in cloud computing. There's this thing called the innovator's dilemma, which everybody's aware of. So Microsoft might say they're believers in cloud computing, but they're only saying that because they want to protect their core assets that are never going to go to the cloud. And so we had to break that frame. I think we did it relatively successfully. Great soundbite to use, courtesy of Stephen Elop, is that people used to say pigs would fly before Office was ever in the cloud. You're going to be seeing flying pigs any day now, right? Because Office is in the cloud, with the Office web apps. So we have to make sure we continue to break through in our vision for the cloud, our differentiated vision, and what we're going to do to get there.
Okay. Bing.
Fun. And differentiated. And it's got a long road to go. I love the work that the Bing PR team has done. They have been really, really good and relentless. And the thing that they've done really well is they've got content. So they've been very thoughtful about not saying things without having content. So they've got partnerships and new features and things that they're going to be announcing and changes to what they've done. And they make really positive news around each of these because they actually have something to say. They have something interesting to say that's different, and they're using different ways of getting it into the market. And we still have a long way to go to sort of pick up the market share we need.
They've done a good job in a short period of time.
They have done a phenomenal job in a very short period of time. And it does look like, sometimes the blinding flash of the obvious is, why has Bing PR been successful? They've had something to say. They've had real content. They've thought hard about how to talk to their audience, and they've talked to the audiences in a way that the audience appreciates.
Can you talk about their brand a little bit and what that means for the rest of the company?
In what way?
Just in terms of how they've positioned their brand and what it does for our brand as a company.
Bing stands as a good example of a fresh brand for Microsoft that actually improves our overall brand. even though it doesn't say, we don't actually call it Microsoft Bing, but it's clearly Bing from Microsoft. It's on our site, and it's a good example of taking that and pushing innovation into the Microsoft brand.
Project Natal. You just get a twinkle in your eye just by saying the word, Frank.
Project Natal. I just, it is a great example of what we can do when we are on our game. If you remember, the genesis of Project Natal, or not the genesis, but when Sony came out with the Wii, or Nintendo came out with the Wii and this controller, they changed the game pretty significantly. And all of a sudden, us and Sony with our high-end graphics and things like that, we're looking kind of weak because they took the gaming market and the gaming console, and they had a product in there that really changed the way people did things. Normally, what we would do is we would come out with our own controller, right? We could have done that. In fact, there was a project that did exactly that added a controller to Xbox. It was basically a Wii-like remote, and the team said, no, we're not going to do that. We have a better idea, and it's called no controller. And we think we can do this, and there's some research that's been going on, and here's this prototype. And then you see the people saw the prototype, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Because it is a game-changing leapfrog moment. And when you see what comes out from Natal, from that team, in terms of the experience and the games that come out, you'll be amazed. If this is not the holiday gift for the on everybody's list this year, I'll be really surprised. Moms will want it, dads will want it, kids will want it. I already know exactly what game my daughter is going to be begging for, so it'll be a good time.
Okay, two more. Windows 7.
Saved the company. How's that?
Wow.
Yeah. If you think about it, people questioned Microsoft on some really core levels. One was, could we bring a operating system to the market on time and in a high quality way? They didn't believe we could do it. Vista was late. It didn't deliver what people wanted. And people said the operating system is dead and it's not relevant. And that served as a proxy for the company overall. When we talk about the brand that is most closely linked to the Microsoft brand is the Windows brand. And so when you see the Windows brand under the kind of attack that we were under with Windows Vista, really dragged the entire brand down. And you actually want a master brand that provides a halo, effect. You want people to say, hey, I want to be associated with that brand. Whatever project that product that is coming into the market, you want to be able to attach Microsoft to that and have it get better. And because we struggled so much with Windows Vista, that really wasn't true. And so when Windows 7 came into the market, and it did well from a sales standpoint, and it did well from a quality standpoint, and it did well from a predictability standpoint, it really changed the dynamic pretty significantly in okay, they can do what they said they could do. And we'll see it with Office as well. These big franchise products that are still interesting and doing new things and providing a ton of value to people.
Okay. Google. Let's put Apple in there too. Just mix it up.
So I've been working with Microsoft for now, I guess 14 years. And we have never had better competitors than we have now. We have never had better competitors. I actually think Apple is the toughest competitor we face currently. You can argue, depending on what day it is, whether Google or Apple is our biggest competitor. I think we have more to worry about from Apple from a competitive standpoint because they've got They've got some big ambitions and fewer warts to some extent. Google is a formidable company with a broad ambition, and their Achilles heel is their arrogance. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And we have to exploit that. They are heading for a fall. We just need to.
Can we quote you on that?
Just ask me a year from now. We'll see whether I was right or not. They're going to take some big hits perceptually, and they've done some things that really are hurting them. And we have to just make sure that we do a good job of what we're doing. We have to be more competitive with them in some areas. Take the gloves off and really be willing to take some shots at them in a way that we've not always been willing to do. The example is like they use these numbers for how many people are using Google Apps and how many companies are doing that. It just makes me crazy. They're lying. I mean, they are just lying. Or at best, there is a kernel of truth there that somebody at Company X downloaded Google Apps maybe by mistake, and so now we're going to count them as a deployment. We have to be better at finding that those nuggets of facts for us that we can illuminate in a way that makes a broader point that doesn't hurt our credibility in quite the same way. So we have to challenge them harder in some ways, and we have to be better from an execution standpoint than they do.
We've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions of Frank as well. So let's start over here.
So Surface, I don't know what the product plans are for Surface. I know that if you look at Windows 7, a lot of the stuff that's showed up in Touch in Windows 7 has been pulled from a lot of the work that Surface did. The challenge I think we've had with Surface is that it was an incredibly cool technology that was expensive, and so our DNA is not really to do expensive things that sell in small volumes. And so I think we've struggled with the business model, not with the product itself, but with the business model to make it pop. But yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, good. Yay.
That's great.
Talk to me later. Yeah. But yeah, Surface is an example of where we did great work. I mean, we had multi-touch and touch in ways that were way early, and we didn't get as much credit as we should have. The innovation narrative, I saw another draft of it. Turns out it's harder to do in a simple way, and get all the executives to buy in to it. So hopefully we're going to have that out in the next probably 2 to 3 weeks. Yes. Slide deck, narrative, the whole shebang.
We had a question over here. Okay.
Huh. It's a great game. If you look at the history of what has changed the company, that series of court decisions really changed the way that we had to behave, in some good ways and in some not good ways. We have to continue to learn what it means to be a responsible company and to compete responsibly and respectfully without tying our hands necessarily. So that's I think that's one of the big challenges we have, is sort of still the legacy of what happened in the United States and how it sort of played out in the rest of the world. Yeah. I'm not going to tackle that one because I'll get it wrong, which is a problem. We do have a set of brand attributes that we drive against as a company. Ease of use for everyone. And the question though is whether or not those are truly authentic to the company and whether we've communicated those so they can be reflected outwards as well. So I'll actually take that as a action
item
of working to make sure that we nail that. Yeah.
Robin?
Mm-hmm. You're actually asking a incredibly complicated question, which is what is the culture of Microsoft, and what is the common thread that links everybody together regardless of product group? We talk about one Microsoft. So what are the attributes that we call on when we think about that, and how do we reflect those in what we do? And in any company of size, people will have a varied set of experiences that call that into question. So, and that is not a problem that just we have. It's a problem that every company has. And the challenge is making sure that we can define that in such a way that it means something. So, as individuals, I think we can work to simplify things. The reason people complicate things, I think one of the reasons people complicate things is that it makes them feel better. Like if you don't have control of something, and a lot of days we don't have control, right? I don't care, how senior you are or where you live. There's enormous things that you don't have control of. But if you can add a layer to it that sort of makes it feel like you've bubbled it up a level and simplified it for you, maybe it gives you a sense of control. And I think one of the challenges that we have is that happens. Everybody does that, and we see it in everything we do, where everybody feels like they have to weigh in and add a little bit. We had a press release that at one point there's like 47 people editing the press releases. I actually put in a request to the product team for the next version of Word that would be just for Microsoft people, is that like you could like vote people down on edits. It's like I would never want to see that person's edit ever again. And then they could no longer make edits to the document. LCA
is a major part of that.
Yeah, LCA. No, this was like there was somebody like 18 layers down in the organization that was editing the Steven Sinofsky's comments on a press release. I'm like, how can this be happening?
Value all opinions.
That's right. So it's a cultural issue that manifests itself in a variety of different ways, and we just have to work on it. I don't have an easy answer.
Real quickly.
Good engineers believe in simplicity. I mean, I'm here to tell you. I mean, you can have complicated outputs, but they start with, good engineers really do start from a position of simplicity and of loosely coupled outputs. So, like you have two ways, like from an engineering standpoint, you have tightly coupled and loosely coupled. Tightly coupled means that they have to work perfectly together to function. Loosely coupled means that they need to work together, but there can be some sort of load balancing along the ways. So, when we overcomplicate things, we assume tightly coupled things, like everything's going to have to flow down from it. But they're, at its core, when we think about marketing stuff, we need to start from we need to have a Rosetta Stone, a source document that everybody can look at, and it can be simple. And then they can pull from it, and they can reflect it out in different ways for the audiences that they have, but that core thing doesn't change. And I'll just look at the cloud speech by Steve as a good example. We spent a lot of time up until like 10 minutes before we went on stage working on the specific words we were using to describe the dimensions, because we wanted that to be the core document that things would reflect out from the cloud. It wasn't a narrative, it wasn't a white paper. It was 5 points that said, this is our differentiated position. And then from that, people need to look at that and say, okay, I'm a salesperson. These 5 points, I can't just lift those up and put them into my document, but everything I say is going to be reflective of that. So that's sort of at its core. That's how you think. That's how I think about, making sure that things get reflected in a simple way.
Tom?
It is interesting, when we talk about Apple, we talk about Google and their Achilles heel is arrogance. Apple's Achilles heel is Steve Jobs, because he has come to personify Apple in such a degree that if he wasn't there, people would question whether Apple has a future. We never got to quite that extent with Bill, because we did a good job of sort of building up other people, both business and technical. And when when he sort of transitioned away, there was an explicit decision that we were never going to have another Bill, a single person that represented the technical vision for the company, and that instead we were going to have a set of people, sort of baby Bills that would have that purpose. It's worked relatively effective externally. So people say, depending on the audience, Ray Ozzie, wow, cloud, Craig Mundy, open, government engagement, future of computing. We score points there. And then we have people in the business groups, the technical leaders in the business group, who serve that area in their specific. Scott Guthrie for the web, against that audience is super highly regarded, just as an example. It's tougher internally because as the founder, Bill actually held a mythic spot, and he would say, I got way more credit for stuff than I deserved. later in later years, because I didn't have. It's a big company. I don't possibly have the scale to do all those things, but we have not done a good job of sort of replacing that role internally with either a set of individuals or a set of processes that made people that lead people to think, believe, that there is a comprehensive vision for where we're going. And you look at the things like the Quests or the Think Week or Tech Fests or all the different things we have. All those don't necessarily add up to any concrete thing for employees. So we're actually looking at what do we do to make sure that there is a more cohesive set of tools or a message to employees that says, here's how we think about this.
Great. We are out of time. I want to thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. It's been very enlightening for me.
It's been
I hope that
fun.
You all learned a little bit of the things that we're trying to achieve with our brand. Is there one last thing that you'd like to have us commit to? Is there a go-do?
I sat through Prism this year. It was my first Prism because as an agency person, I never got to go. And I had lunch with a set of people from Central and Eastern Europe, and they were depressed. And I'm like, yeah, these are some long faces. And they said, yeah, so we're 4 hours into Prism. We now have 40 go-dos and no resources no additional resources to go do those things. Everybody comes up with their PowerPoint and they say, blah blah blah, and then here are your 10 go-dos, your 4 go-dos for the field. They said, yeah, we've counted. We have 40 go-dos and no resources to do that. So I have no go-dos, but I would say think hard, about 2 things. Finding that core of an idea that you build stuff around, And when people present you with fluff, push on it. I mean, really try to strip it down and deconstruct it. And if you can't find that core idea, ask them to do it again, or to really think through that, because that's the only way we're going to change that piece of culture. And on the second one, as we talked about social media, really think about the brand that you project to the world, and it's a combination of you and Microsoft, and making sure that you reflect that in an authentic way for both you and for Microsoft.
Thank you very much.
FX Shaw. I'm very consistent in my naming nomenclature. It's all FX Shaw for Facebook and Twitter and everything else. We'll see whether that's a good thing or not long term.
Okay. Thank you so much, Frank.